My guest today on Dan's talk is Spencer Schneider, who is a lawyer and resident of East Hampton, who wrote a book which is coming out tomorrow called Manhattan Cult Story. It's an autobiographical book. It's going to be quite sensational, I think, because it is about a secret life he had for many years in Manhattan that I guess most of his adult life. And tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you first got involved with this.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Dan. I'm happy to be here. I'm a Long Island guy. I grew up in Levittown and in Hewlett on the South Shore. I went to law school in Manhattan and became a corporate lawyer and worked, one of those jobs where you work 60 hours a week doing, work for big corporations. And when I was 29, I was approached by an acquaintance of mine, a man who I admired and respected, who invited me to go to a secret group that he was part of, and that it was a very special invitation. And where we studied the philosophers Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, which is these Russian mystics. And it was very popular in the 30s and 40s.
Had you heard of these guys?
No. And I was a philosophy major. I had never heard of them. And their books could only be bought in those kind of stores like where they sell crystals and they have like new age stuff, and the music is, like Indian music. And, I'd never go into those stores, but, I was very suspicious.
Where was this and how many people were at that first meeting?
Yeah, so the meeting was in Tribeca. He really had to twist my arm to go. It was in some loft above a garment store in Lower Broadway. And there were like 60 people there, but they were like me, they were, young professional people in suits and ties and, a bunch of white people who looked like me, basically. And, I wasn't that impressed with it and I wasn't inclined to come back, but they did snag me because, and it really was without my knowledge, because I had a crisis. I lost my job, and they were very comforting. And I felt that this was at least a place I would hang out for a bit.
So is this, you said to hang out, is how often did it meet?
Oh, yeah. Well, hang out meaning, we had 2 meetings a week in the evenings, and we otherwise went about our daily lives. But the whole thing was to keep it secret. They were very big on secrecy. And
why was that? Why would they want to do that?
Well, what they told us was, look, it's an esoteric school. It's just for you. And it's your own private life. And besides, you couldn't really explain it to people what it is. And, this is very exclusive. We don't want word to get out about it. And it's important that you keep it to yourself. Otherwise, you won't really gain the benefits. Now, the whole idea was this sort of self-improvement.
Who was running it?
The woman, well, we didn't meet her for a year, but the actual leader's name was Sharon Gans.
And what do you mean you didn't meet her for a year? So she wasn't at this first meeting or for a while?
No, we didn't. No, she had other people who were like lieutenants to her leading, and we had no idea of who they were. We didn't know anybody's last names. There was no internet there. There was nothing, no way to look up anything about them. And it was just like in 1989, there's no way to know anything. And, eventually Sharon Gans appeared. We weren't told of who she was, but if we had the internet, then we would have been able to find out that she was basically a washed up actress who'd been in one movie and been in some experimental theater in the 60s, and that she and her husband, whose name was Alex Horn, had left San Francisco in the late 70s because the San Francisco Chronicle had done an expose on them because they were accused of running a cult that abused children, that forced people to do labor, that they had some allegations of rape, that they were abusing people to do work for them on their behalf.
But
And
you didn't know this and couldn't know it.
no way. I didn't know about their history until I was a good 18 years in. I had no idea. I just had no idea. And even if you looked on the internet when it became readily available, I guess in the mid 90s, right?
Later, I think.
Yeah. Let's say around 9/11, around then, even if it was available, even if I looked it up, it would have been hard to find because it wasn't that developed. But eventually it came out, and I still stayed despite learning about their awareness, because learning about their history, because I was so dependent upon them. And that's really the nature of cults in general. I mean, it's like an abusive relationship, like an abused spouse. Their whole identity is based upon being with this other person, the codependency issues and whatnot. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I am, I've spoken to many people who've
An example of something that happened that would be explain that more.
Oh, you mean about like
that would make you feel dependent and you have to do this.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, for one, they were very encouraging with me in starting my own practice, my own law practice, because I had lost my job in '89, and my practice did very well. I did exceptionally well, and I really attributed that to my connection with the group. This whole mystical idea of, and there are a lot of philosophical ideas which I can't really get into now, but the Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, cosmology is something that we took upon ourselves. And so I felt that without this connection to, and we called this group School. That's all it was called. It had no name, it had no advertising, no signage, nothing. And nobody knew about this thing. I never told anybody, and people kept it secret. But so one is I felt there was a success element. I also felt that if I left, I would lose that connection because people were ostracized if they left. Secondly, I eventually got married to somebody in the group, and it was, for all intents and purposes, an arranged marriage. And the understanding was that if you left the group, your relationships, including a marriage or business relationships, would come to an end because people were so, so obedient to Sharon.
I was asking about like a specific thing she might do or say that would make you feel you had to do something and it was okay, or you didn't realize it wasn't okay.
Oh, I mean, there were so many things. I mean, I could think of like the first one off the top of my head is she would frequently tell spouses to leave other spouses. And she would say, look, this other spouse is no good for you. They're hurting your possibilities. You're not going to be able to improve your life because they're holding you back. And sometimes, often people would do that. People would give up their kids for adoption. What would she say? I'm your teacher. I know you better than you know yourself. And this is what you need to do. And people would object. And if you objected, she would berate people and humiliate them. And there'd be this sort of groupthink and peer pressure on people to, toe the line. I mean, there were some outrageous.
What did she do that was outrageous to you that you realize now was?
Oh, I mean, well, towards the end, it got even more outrageous towards me. I mean, at one point, my then wife and I were trying to have a baby, and we ultimately did. A young, healthy boy who's now 23, but she was a little older. She was, over 40, and Sharon felt that that it would be hard for her to get pregnant, and maybe the child would not develop right, and whatnot. So she encouraged me to impregnate my ex-wife's 19-year-old daughter, and that suggesting that the daughter carry a baby, and that my then wife and I would raise the child. So this is basically incest, a suggestion that I, did not obviously follow. At one point when my wife and I did get divorced, and many couples in the group got divorced, they were not really good relationships. She tried to, meddle in the divorce and, affect child custody. We had, as there was an article in the New York Post that brought up, they were very focused on one aspect of the group, which was we did boxing. And it was kind of like a fight club. We met every Friday secretly, 20 of us guys, and we get in a boxing ring. And these guys are, like me, they're lawyers, they're not really physical kind of stuff. And we put on the helmets and we'd fight at Gleason's gym. And a lot of us got hurt. I had a broken nose, I had a concussion, but they encouraged us not to go to the doctor. They would say, just tough it out. This sort of macho thing, there's this macho nonsense going on with a lot of people in the United States now. I think you probably notice, this sort of being tough. And this group was very much espoused that, Let me think of, I'll tell you another outrageous thing that Sharon did was she believed that gay people could be converted. And she was all in favor of her own brand of conversion, which was asking gay men to marry women. And she was successful in doing that a number of times, including having a gay man marry her daughter.
Wow. What was her attraction? What brought her to everybody? You must have admired her in some way that was not right, but nevertheless.
Right. It's so hard to pin that down to one thing, but I would say a lot of it had to do with this sort of groupthink and peer pressure. I mean, we were in the group for a year before we met her, and we very much liked the leaders who ran the group, but they were they admired her so much, so we sort of picked off of that. The other thing is she could be extremely kind. I mean, no one could make you feel better than she did. There was something about her, even though I thought she was nuts, she just had a way of making you feel so good about yourself. And, people revered her. So if she showed personal attention to you, you were like, oh, that's like Buddha, You know, it was like Jesus Christ or Moses, whatever.
Let me ask you just slightly different. Did you always meet in the same place and were there always a large 50, 60 people? How was it arranged? Was it like a classroom or was it a living room? What was it like?
It was a rented law. Well, we met over the years, we met in 3 different spaces, all in Manhattan. Well, originally in Tribeca, then Chelsea, then the Garment Center, in office spaces, really. And it was basically a large room with homemade built risers with plastic chairs that were placed on it. And the teachers or leaders of the group, they called themselves teachers because we called it school, sat in the front of the room in director chairs. Sharon, however, had a pedestal that was set up for her. And she had a lazy boy that was set up for her. And she sort of reclined and pontificated from her lazy boy.
Wow.
And, you know, she would have, you know, her vodka there, her cigarettes, her, you know, finger foods, everything would be set up for her. And people would, you know, serve her throughout the evening. You know, if she threw a napkin down, somebody would come up and get it.
How long were you in the group altogether? How many years?
23.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How did it end?
It ended when you know, Sharon really meddled in my marriage ending. And that was a big turnoff. She also meddled in my business affairs.
Did she meet with anybody that you knew, or was it always with you as an agent, so to speak?
No, I mean, I was in the group in the classes, so I always saw her in classes, but we also spoke on the phone. I had a very close relationship with her. I mean, she basically used me as her chauffeur. And, you know, I spoke to her on the phone at least once a week. You know, I drove her to and from class.
She didn't talk to your wife. She didn't talk to your business people.
Oh, both. My business people were in the cult, and so was my wife.
See,
so she had complete control over my life.
Oh.
And really, the big thing that set it off was that I met someone, a woman, and you know, I told her about the group. I just was so unhappy there, and I told her about it, and she encouraged me to leave. And I was the other thing was I was having a nervous breakdown. I mean, I was having.
What year was this?
2012.
Oh, so you've taken 10 years to decide to write the book. I read she's passed on.
Yes.
That was made it more possible for you to think of doing that.
Well, I started writing it before she passed away. And I got the book contract shortly after she passed away. But
she know you were writing about her?
I think she did, because I had a blog, and I still do have a blog, which is highly critical of her. You know, nobody, I'm the first survivor really to be not anonymous and speak about her. I mean, there are a few other people online who talk about it, but mine is the first book about it. Most people keep their mouths shut, even people who left. And there have been thousands of people in the group, and people are ashamed to talk about it and afraid.
Well, if 60 met in one room, how would there be 1,000 altogether? She must have met every day with different groups.
Well, she had, at any given time, there were a few hundred people in the group because she had different classes. And she had groups in Boston, and she had one in Copenhagen. And I think she had about 3 or 4 classes in New York. So there were a few hundred people at any given time, but people came and went.
Mm-hmm.
And this went on since, you know, the early 80s, it started in New York. So it's been 40 years, you know.
So was there any press on this at the end? Is it's gone now? Of course, she's like,
No, it's continuing. It's
Yeah.
continuing. Yeah. She died and she gave her ownership in the group that, there's a corporate group that, gets all of the money. She
Did you
gave
have
that.
to turn over money to her too?
Oh yeah, that's why she did this. That's why she did this. This was all about money. People paid in cash. People paid tuitions of $300 to $500 a month. And I estimate that she took in about $1 million a year in cash.
Mhm.
She lived in an $8 million apartment in the Plaza Hotel, which is where she passed away. And
How old was she when she died?
she was 86. She's buried in here in the Hamptons. She's buried off her Springs fireplace in the Springs. She had a home in Bridgehampton, which was built by members of the cult. And she had homes in Montana,
Where did she have a home out here?
in the hills, in Bridgehampton Hills, on I forgot the name of the street. Blank
Yes, there's a blank lane.
Lane. Yeah,
Yep, it's off of Scuttle Hole, I think. Or
correct.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah, and it's like halfway up from Scuttle Hole. It's behind trees there, and it's right on the
Did
farm.
she have a family and have a husband and all, or was she single and on her own?
She had been married twice, and she got divorced. I think in the mid 70s, and then she got remarried to a guy named Alex Horn, who introduced her who was already a cult leader and introduced her to all this philosophy. And the two of them ran the cult. His name was Alex Horn, and he passed away in 2008. He's also buried out here. And she has 2 children from her first husband, and they're estranged from her. They were estranged from her.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
think. She
yeah.
also, I should say, she lived in Montauk for a while.
Where?
Her and her husband had a home off of Old Montauk Highway in the President section, the president names.
Yes, Grant.
Yeah, one of those streets, and they had an A-frame.
Sure.
And I found this because I did a lot of research on them. They were busted for growing pot. And in I don't know, sometime in the 70s, and there's a piece about them in the Star.
Mm-hmm.
And like a docket, the docket.
Yeah.
They were growing pot there. And the husband, his name was Ezra Kulko, who was a dentist. He took the rap. I think he paid some fine, and that was that. But nothing happened to her.
Yeah. Looking back on it, do you think it was a good idea that you got involved with this, even though it was pretty awful?
I mean, nothing good came of it except that I have a terrific son, and I guess you could say that I made some friends who once they left and I was gone, we have some friendships. I did enjoy the first years in it, but there's nothing that I can take away from that of any good. So that's one of the reasons I was compelled to write the book, was to sort of take this experience so I could
Put it behind you, I guess, in some way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a personal element, but I really did want to expose them because they deserve to be exposed. And I feel that the story can be helpful to other people.
Yeah.
In so many ways, about resilience and getting your life back and, your dignity. And, there's a lot of groupthink these days.
I think when somebody goes through a crisis, they can be vulnerable they reach out for help from people, and they can be vulnerable and thinking, in fact, some things can help. joining a group. I had a tough year one year, and I joined a commune out in Quogue, and I treasure that year. I only was there for about a year, and made some wonderful friends, but it was nothing like what you went through.
I think if it had been a year or two and it lacked all of the, trappings of a cult, meaning that the leader was benevolent and good meaning.
That's who mine was.
Yeah. Yeah. Yours sounds like it was. I mean, it was a commune. It's a fantastic, great thing to have a community. There's nothing like a community. We all yearn for that. But, it's so easily, you can be easily taken advantage, especially in an environment that's all encompassing. As you know, I mean, people are tricked all the time, but yeah.
Well, it's quite a story, and I look forward to seeing the book and perhaps meeting you at the author's night.
Yeah.
And you've been coming out to the Hamptons for 10 or 12 years after being here with your family and all that. So you're quite familiar with us. And thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Dan.
Sure. I'm talking to Spencer Schneider and his new book, Manhattan Cult Story. Bye-bye.
Take care.